Okay, you're listening to the Mental Money Podcast. This is your host, Natalie. Thank you for coming back. If you are a return offender, if you're not, and this is your first time here, then I really appreciate you coming. I know today's episode, just because of what we talk about and all the grant goodies that's been going around, this episode is going to be extremely valuable. In the 2 minutes, 5 minutes that we've been speaking already, I've already learned what I need to know about my own life. So I appreciate you, Alissa, for coming on today.
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. So, Alissa, first of all, we met on TikTok
Yes.
randomly. So you actually, it's interesting that I found your comment on someone else's uh I found your comment on someone else's page that was sent to me by someone that's in my community because they're always sending me grant stuff, right?
Okay.
And I was just like, okay, this young lady just mentioned that she reviews grants. So I was just like, um, yeah, let's get into it, right? So I don't know who messaged who first, but I think it's kismet that we met or that we connected because I'm sure you have a lot of insight for individuals who just are having such a hard time navigating that process, and for them it's just the hardest thing to kind of wrap their minds around. So, Alyssa, thank you again for coming on. I'm gonna say thank you like 4 times.
It's okay. Thank you. I appreciate being here. Like I mentioned,
Yeah.
this is my first podcast interview, but I'm excited to be of service to the people. So,
Okay, good. So tell us a little bit about your background. You mentioned that you were military, Navy.
yes,
Thank you for your service.
I appreciate the support. I enlisted in the Navy in 2015, and I served for the last 8 years. I just got out last December. And like we
Mm,
spoke about a little bit before, I had the opportunity to network with a lot of different kinds of people while I was serving. And that led
mm.
me to some of what I'm doing now, which is reviewing grants as they come in for a collection of different people and companies.
Right. So you kind of mentioned in short that one of the common misconceptions is that grants come from the donation side of things, or
Yes.
nonprofit side of things. Could you help clear up that common misconception?
Yes. So a lot of what I do in reviewing grants is reviewing either grant application, grant questions that come in pre-application, things like that. And one of
Mhm,
the most common misconceptions is that this funding or that this quote unquote free money is coming from a bunch of Fortune 500 companies that want your IP, that want your ideas, that want your content, that want
mhm.
your business idea, whatever the case is. And a
Yeah.
lot of people don't realize that most grant funding actually comes from private foundations, whether it's a
Mm,
foundation set up by someone who is no longer here and they had a vested interest in a particular industry, whether it is a collection of businesses, whether it be small businesses, local businesses, or multi-million dollar businesses that set up foundations
right,
to serve a specific purpose. So
right. So it's not all altruistic.
it's not always no. I'm gonna be completely honest. 8 out of 10 times it is self-serving, whether it's for PR, whether it's for a
Mhm,
tax write-off, whether it's for incubation of something that they're working on, or whether they're looking for
mhm.
talent. A lot of times they're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing it because it serves a purpose to them and it's easier for them to cut a check and have someone do something or work on something. Well, again, whether it's just PR, then again, you get something out of it.
Right. No, that makes sense. So with that in mind, right? It's not all altruistic, right?
Mhm.
There's a tax incentive. There's some kind of incentive for the companies to do that. But what so now that we know that, how to approach the application, or how would you suggest that we approach the application with that in mind?
I think I've learned a lot in the last 6 months, and I always tell people that either come to me with questions, people that I know personally, that when you're applying for a grant or funding of any kind, the number one thing that you need to ask yourself is, how am I going to be of service? And it's not just of service
Mm,
to that business or whomever is giving you this money, but to the people
yeah.
that they're expecting your product or your service to serve. And once you
Mm,
have a clear answer as to what you're doing and why you're doing it, it becomes a lot easier to answer the questions. It becomes a lot easier if you have to do an interview for the grant to, speak as to why certain things are the way they are, why you operate the way you do. And I think it's very important that people understand their why before they apply
yeah.
for a grant.
That's a good point. Because when I tell people, like, hey, you should probably have a good idea going into it, don't just ask for money. They're just like, huh? What do you mean? I'm like, no, girl, this ain't a handout.
Yes, sometimes it is as easy as filling out a grant application that's maybe
Mhm.
4 to 5 questions and someone just, slides you a few $1,000s. But a lot of times,
Right.
the applications that I process, the benefactors genuinely want to know how is whomever I'm giving this money to going to help X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, for sure. So, hmm. So then what are some common things that you see that will like automatically eliminate someone? Like it's not even you don't even have to go through the entire application. You just see one thing and it's just like, yeah, go ahead. You can go now.
Okay, there are a few things that when I see them, a lot of times the people that are funding the grants will ask us to kind of weed out if we can, is people that genuinely have no idea what industry they're in and how that industry
Mhm.
works. So if, for
Mhm.
example, someone is in retail and the grant is for retail, whether it's for physical retail, e-commerce, whatever, what have you, if
Right.
you are writing a grant or you're submitting a pitch deck, and you're writing about your business, your product, that's great. But if you have no idea what industry you're in, what the market is right now, where it's going, projections, if you have no idea what the trends are, if you have no idea how to differentiate yourself within your industry, put forward in a way that the grant funding committee can understand why they
Right.
should choose you within this industry, whether it's competitive, whether it's new, whether it's
Mhm.
understood. If you can't speak to your industry as though you are an expert, then so that's something that a lot of times we'll see. Well, at least personally, I've seen, I'll review applications and sometimes I'll be like, this is interesting. This
Mhm.
sounds, like something that someone might be interested in funding. However,
Mhm.
you can't effectively communicate what you're doing, why you're doing it, how it's different from everybody else. And a lot of times that is the reason people do not get these grants.
Yeah, this is gonna be a lead magnet. I'm not gonna hold you, girl.
Yeah.
This clip right here, I'm just gonna save it right here. This one, all right? Clip. Because this is gonna be a lead
It's
magnet.
a
Yeah.
lot of it has to do with the confusion and the purposeful mystification of grants and funding.
Yeah.
And that is just the reality of it, because I'm telling you, 6 months ago, before I started doing this, I applied for my first grant maybe October or September of last year, and I was lost. I
Right. Yeah.
didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to communicate what I was doing or why I was doing it. I just knew that I had a business. It was important to me. And so it had to be good enough for someone else to think, yes, we're going to give her some money. And that was not at all the case. There was a
No.
lot of learning, there was a lot of unlearning. There was so much that I had to figure out and learn. And I think that a lot of these things are mystified and kind of confusing, and that stops people from pursuing it. But
Mhm.
once you have a base understanding, and there are certain principles that I've learned, again,
Mhm.
knowing what industry you're in, how to
Yeah.
communicate what you're doing, how are you different, and
Yeah.
understanding what you're applying for, is makes the world of difference. I've seen so many people apply to grants that they are not eligible for at all. And it's like, did you read what the grant was for? Did you read the eligibility requirements? Did you understand if you're applying for an accelerator program, what is going to be required of you, what you may have to sacrifice, et cetera, et cetera? And a lot of times, I'd say 60% of the applications that we see aren't even eligible for the grants that they apply for.
60.
60%.
Dang. So okay, so shameless plug, okay, because I don't give a damn. Listen, so 60% of applicants aren't even qualified. And then you have the ones that might be qualified, don't even know how to articulate what it is that they do. So what does that drop that down to? What, like maybe 20%?
It's about 15%. 15% of people that I see apply to grants are eligible, have communicated well, have met the requirements, and get passed on to whoever evaluates it after I do. And a lot of times we'd see maybe, well, I've seen a lot of the applications that I process and move forward get funded. And it's because when I'm looking at your application, things that I'm looking for, primarily, the very first thing I look for is, are you eligible? If you're not eligible and you didn't understand you were eligible, I'm sorry, but I don't have the time to explain it to you. We're probably past the point in time where you can resubmit. Your
Right.
application is scrapped because we don't have time to process and correct people and retrain and teach you. That's not my purpose when I'm in the committee or processing an application. So a lot of times I'll see 6 out of 10 applications get dropped. And it's because they didn't understand what the requirements were or what the eligibility requirements were that they had to meet. And unfortunately, whether or not their business is good, unfortunately, I have seen application where I'm like, this is amazing, but you're not eligible.
Yeah.
And that's just the hard truth.
Dang, that's wild. Okay, well, also 6-figure funding training, because we'll teach you how to articulate your business. We'll teach you how to put yourself in position to get to that 15%. Okay. So wow. You know, it's not interesting. It's great that you're saying this because Sharita, and I'm not calling anybody out. She's part of our group. She knows I'm going to speak her name probably at some point. She owns an employee resource, a business that consults for employee resource groups, right? So she builds them out inside of corporations. And her business idea is like so needed now because of like diversity and inclusion. And it's interesting because before she did the training, she was just like, all right, I'm not even going to bother with this. This is too much. But now that she's doing it, she's just like, okay, where do I pull from my proposal to like get the answers? And she's already been funded out of like the first time that we've done the application since she's done her proposal. And I'm just like, girl, that's all they want to know is that you know what you're doing.
Definitely.
They wanna know what you're doing. So the training then was like, I discounted it for the community members for 300. So her grant has already pretty much paid for itself, like paid for the training. Yeah. So wow, that's incredible. Yeah. So I'm doing the right thing. All right, great. Have you ever been on any of my lives at all?
I've seen some of the lives, and I think I was on one on Tuesday.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I didn't feel like the topic had, something that would be of service to me and what I'm doing.
Right.
But I've been on there. I think I spend more time listening to the podcasts on Apple than I do anything else. And that's just because that's where I have the most time. I'm either doing laundry or something like that. But
Right. The reason why I asked is because I want to see if you had any feedback on anything that I've done that you wouldn't advise for, or that you would advise for, or like should keep doing, or change up, or like not do anymore. Because I actually tell people like, hey, I think you should apply anyway. Like this is how to position things, but
yeah.
you're saying don't do that. So
I think there's a gray line, and that's why it's important to understand your why. I'm always, always, always going to tell people, understand your why, because sometimes I'll see applications where I'm like, okay, maybe the way that your business is structured may make you ineligible for this grant. However, the way you've answered your questions, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of times behind the scenes, we can make exceptions for certain things. And people don't know or understand that. So if everything else is right, and there's just one thing that either disqualifies you or maybe did not meet the eligibility requirements, I can go to either the fundee or the board and say, hey, this person meets every other thing besides this one thing. Maybe it's they're in a state that we didn't include in the funding eligibility. Maybe they're a sole proprietor and they're not incorporated. Whatever it may be, they can say no, of course, but we have gotten things waived or made exceptions if your application is good.
Yeah, that's good to know. I need to write myself a note to ask you something before we go.
Okay.
If I say this, I'm sure I'll remember. Okay, so that's so interesting. All right, so there's a criteria essentially.
Yes.
If they don't meet these criterias, and they're not eligible to move forward, and it does have to do with articulation. It does have to do with the actual business, the business structure. Is there anything else that you see that just kind of just like big no, definitely don't do, hard and fast?
I think I think one of the things that a lot of us see when we're processing the application is, again, where is your service? Where is the intention? And a lot
Mm,
of it is me, 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 me. I want this for me because I'm going to do this, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, great. But every single business model out there has to do with being of service to someone else. When you sell someone a service, when you sell someone a product, it's not about you.
yeah.
It's not necessarily about your business. It's
Mm,
about the customer. It's about the consumer. It's about the person on the receiving end. So if your entire grant application is about you, why you need the money, what you're going to do with it, what you can't do without it, then a lot of times what we see for the people that I work for is that that's not what they're interested in. They
no.
don't care if your business is making six figures already. They don't care if you're in pre-startup phase and you haven't earned a dime. We
Mm,
want to know, how is what you're doing or why you're doing it going to be beneficial to the people receiving it?
okay. No, that makes sense. So let's say there was a question that, okay, we were going through this on live right before our call. So it was the Fearless Fund application, and it asks the first question. It says, "Tell us about why you started this business
Mhm.
and what makes you unique." How would you answer that question?
I think two of the most common ways that I see people answer this question, again, is the self serving answer and then the service answer.
Yeah.
And so, what gets passed along or moved forward in the process all the time is the answer that has to do with service.
Mhm.
Now, if you completely started your business out of a self serving purpose, that is perfectly fine. But at some point, you have to recognize, am I buying all of the services? Am I buying all of the products? Or is this meant to be for someone else? And then
Right.
when you get to that point, you have to think, once I'm here, how do I articulate what I turned my love or my passion into something that is beneficial for other people? And a lot of times, I think the answers that we see that gets the most no's would have to be, I started this business because I had a passion for X, Y, or Z, and I
Mm,
wanted to turn that into a way that I could make a living, et cetera, et cetera.
right.
There's nothing wrong with that. However, that can't be your full stop.
No.
It cannot. After you turned your passion or your love for a business, what did you do?
Right.
Who was it about? Was it about you and just fulfilling your passion? Or after you got to that point, did you do something that was supposed to serve someone else? Because
Mhm.
that's how you scale.
Yeah.
And in a nutshell, what these, they're not saying that they're not going to fund someone who isn't, you know, in good standing. Maybe they're a startup and they don't have revenue to show in their application. But what they want to know most of the time is that this money isn't just going to waste, regardless of the fact that they're getting a tax write-off, that is good for PR, et cetera, et cetera. It's still money that can be utilized somewhere by someone,
Right.
right? So if I'm
Yeah.
going to give this money, whether or not you can guarantee me you're going to succeed, I want to know that you're doing something that has purpose.
Yeah, no, for sure. Even like on the Fearless Fund application, like when we were reading through the like the not qual it's like their mission, their vision. I forget what I'm trying
Yes.
to, but they're saying that they want to work with companies that are scalable and have an aggressive growth plan.
Yeah.
So if you have those things, and if you were hypothetically working to review the Fearless Fund, someone who just puts self-serving answers, it sounds like, would be disqualified. So
Yeah.
now, how do you answer the question about the uniqueness? What makes their business unique?
I think that is probably one of the most difficult questions to answer, in my opinion. And the reality is, we aren't all the same. We all don't think the same. And so people inherently think that because of that human aspect, that they are unique and their business is unique, without
Mhm.
realizing that regardless of the fact that people are different and we think differently, that your business model and how you're doing what you're doing may not actually be unique. um,
Right.
this is the reason why knowing your why is important and knowing your
Mm,
industry is important, because if you don't understand those two things, one, you can't differentiate how you are unique from other prospective applicants, and two, you can't articulate it. So I
right.
think when reading grant applications that ask how are you unique? You need to understand this is the industry that I'm in. This is the standard. This is what other people are doing. You need to not just look at yourself, but you need to look at who are the prospective applicants. When
Right.
I'm applying for a grant or when I'm encouraging someone else to apply for a grant, I've thought about these things. If I'm
Mhm.
applying for a grant, and again, we're going to use retail. A retail conglomerate is funding a grant. They want people that are scalable, X, Y, or Z. How am I unique? I have to think to myself, I, Solteria, is applying for this grant. This is what I do. This is how I do it. Is there somebody else like me that could apply to this grant? How am I
Yeah.
different from them? And
Mhm.
that's the part that people don't think about and they miss when answering that question. Because
Yeah.
again, they're thinking me, and not thinking of who they're serving. If
Right.
I think to myself, how is my customer receiving whatever it is I'm selling? How is it good, either in a social aspect,
Mhm.
whether it's an environment
Yeah.
aspect of your business, whether it's charity work, what have you, you have to think to yourself, is someone else doing that? And
Mhm.
even if they are, that's completely fine. But how you articulate what you do, why you do it, and how that may or may not be different within your industry is important.
Yeah. 100%. So we recommend doing a SWOT analysis.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, prior military, I love SWOT analysis.
Oh, yeah.
Tell
Mhm.
people all of the time, if you can, especially if you have to submit like a pitch, include a SWOT analysis. Sometimes
100%.
they don't ask for them, and it's sometimes okay to submit things that they don't ask for in grants
Mhm.
as long as you've met what their requirements are. It
Yeah.
is, unless they say keep it to a 10-page minimum,
Mm.
that keep it to a 10-page minimum. But if you've answered all of their questions and met all the requirements in 8 pages, include a SWOT analysis in page 9.
100%.
Include something else in page 10. Get to the
Mhm.
10 pages and include more information so that they understand how you're different from everybody else that's applying. The great thing about SWOT analysis, and a lot of times when I'm doing them with other people, is that it forces you to see yourself or your
Yeah.
business in a different light.
Yeah.
And again, your why, your industry, is this is where this is going to show up. If I asked, what are your strengths? And again, it's me, I can do this, I can do that, I have done this or have done that. That's great. But how is that a strength within your industry? How is
Mhm.
that going to show whomever is going to hand you this money that this is a strength that they can use to scale your business?
Yeah.
And that's when you start churning and thinking, okay, there are things that you may not have thought about as far as scalability, as far as being competitive, that you might have to, change around how you answer things. You might have to shift your perspective and answer
Mhm.
them in a different way. And a lot of times, a SWOT analysis, when people see those things in black and white, especially when they're considering industry and who else may be applying for the grant that they ultimately want, it changes people's answers a lot of times.
100,000%. Yeah, that's probably one of my, like, secret weapons, like, SWOT analysis. I've had to rework, and after our conversation off air, because I have a question for you, I think I might even have to rework my SWOT analysis again, because
Okay.
I've had to rework this thing so many times just with the consideration of, like, okay, there's new entrants into the market all the time, right?
All of the
Mm.
time.
People still, they borrow. Okay. They borrow all the time. So we have to constantly be looking at, like, what, and that's a threat in and of itself, like new
Yeah.
entrants to the marketplace, and then how replicable your business is. So if that's a threat, then you have to find ways to kind of like build in things that are
Exactly.
native to making sure that those threats are eliminated.
And that's part of your SWOT, because if I can it's one thing to identify your threats or the things that you may not be good at and your
Mhm.
weaknesses, but again, if you're going to include it in a grant application, you want to say, how am I combating these things?
Yeah.
Because you're essentially saying that, yes, I may not be X, Y, or Z. However, I understand that these are what my limits are right now. This is how I'm working on it. This is what I'm going to do about it. These are the processes we have in place. These are the
Yeah.
systems we have in place. And a lot of times I see things get funded, whether it's someone's startup over someone's established business, because that
Mhm.
established business does not have an understanding of where
Yeah.
their weaknesses are and how to
Yeah.
combat them over someone who's just starting out. Your
Yeah.
SWOT is so important, even if it's not included in your grant, to do yourself, because it really does shift perspective.
Yeah. I have to agree with you, and I feel like people don't wanna do it because I don't think and I can only speak for us because I deal with us, right? I don't know how white people or Indian people culturally deal with this, but our culture has a really big thing about like wrong and right. And I think that I have a theory about where that comes from, but we're not going to get into that. But right and wrong and like and that kind of stems from not being able to kind of really face yourself and deal with yourself because to do a SWOT analysis, you have to be radically accepting of the fact that your idea may be trash.
Yes.
And
I
it's
Number one thing when I'm doing SWOT with people is that they cannot be honest with themselves.
no.
It's really hard to push and ask questions and try to get them to that realization
Yeah,
without coming off as dismissive or
yeah,
degrading. But
mhm,
what you have to realize while you're going through the SWOT analysis process is that a lot of times, once you have the answers to those questions, that becomes the basis for everything else.
everything,
How is your
everything.
business unique? I've gone through my strengths and weaknesses. I've analyzed the market. I know my why. I know what industry I'm in. I can easily answer that question. And if someone
Yeah,
has to ask me a question about how I've answered it, I can give you a rebuttal. I can give you whatever it is you need. You can
right.
do that without a SWOT, but that SWOT is your foundation. And if you're not honest with yourself when you're doing it, you're setting yourself up for a real shaky,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, not even just grants though, it's also running the business.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, and to be honest, so full transparency, 'cause this is what we gotta do, right?
Yeah.
When I first started online teaching about grants, I made the mistake of not understanding the call, right?
Okay. Okay.
Big mistake. I thought it was just like, "All right, I got an impression. The Lord put it on my heart to Nat,
Mhm.
you've been doing this for years. Teach the people what you know. These people need your help. Okay, girl? Just teach the people what you know. It's not gonna be everything, but it's gonna be some things, right?" And then I was just like, "Okay, I see how this can work into my business model." So then
Mhm.
enter in now trying to create the challenge and getting people funded and blah, blah, blah. Alyssa, I didn't I did not conduct a SWOT analysis on
Mhm.
that element of the business, and I did not eliminate those threats, and now I'm salty, and now I'm
Yeah.
mad because
I see. I tell people I do a SWOT for myself and anything that I'm doing on a
yeah,
quarterly basis.
period.
It
That's
doesn't have to be when you first start the business. It's not something that you do once a year. Anytime you add a product or service that is
yeah,
different from what you're doing, anytime you pivot in your business, do a SWOT analysis. And if you can do them regularly, do them regularly, because what was a threat last month is an
right,
opportunity next month.
yeah,
And sometimes you have to adjust. And if you don't know that you need to do that, what I see people doing is I start a business, I do a SWOT, this is where I am. This is
mhm,
where you were when you started. Where are
yeah,
you? What are the
right,
threats now?
right,
What are the potential threats next week? And
right.
if you're thinking that I just use this as my end all be all, then you're putting yourself at a disadvantage.
Mm. Yeah, and again, so happy you're saying this because I've told the ladies like, so I work with this one another young lady, her name is Jolena, and when we first started in February, she had one version of her proposal, and I
Okay.
told her then, like I told her a couple weeks ago, this is a living, breathing document, Jolena. This is not gonna look
It's
the same.
constantly changing. Absolutely.
It's not gonna look the same in a couple months. And she's just like, "No, can I just pull from here?" And I'm like, "Girl, no." So now I'm like, "Okay, you're gonna rework this and how we're gonna rework
Mhm.
it." But it's constant, constant. And I wish and I'm gonna just kind of drill this home, not to be redundant, but y'all, if you're listening, if you're listening to understand, if you're listening to comprehend, what Alissa is saying is so valuable and what makes businesses survive past year one. 18% of businesses will fail in year one. Do not be part of that 18% because guess what? You're not assessing. And if you look at the pieces, the elements, and you realize that this is not working, quit and move on. Pivot. Like your business will not look the same day one than it does day 331. So if you're married to the idea of it looking a certain way, you've already set yourself up to fail. No, no lie. Take it from anybody. I don't care. Me, Alissa, your mama, just do something that's not gonna put you in a position to not succeed. That's really what that comes down to. And I'm so passionate about that. I'm sorry. I'm like damn near yelling because it's so painful to watch. It really
It
is.
really is, especially when you know that there are people and ideas and businesses in your community that deserve to be all the way up there, and they're just
Oh my
stuck.
God.
They're stuck in this way of
There's
thinking, and I understand it's hard to get out of, but the only way for us to propel ourselves the way that we deserve to propel is to break out of the habits that we've formed, is to find ourselves in places where we can be educated. And that doesn't have to mean going and get a degree. Speak to other people, find people like not listen to a podcast. There are things out there, there's bits and pieces of information that can help inform you as to,
yeah.
what, I have an idea, I'm doing X, Y, and Z, it's not working. Sometimes all you need is a shake from somebody else to be like, what you're doing is not working.
Yeah.
Let's change. Let's switch gears. Let's do X, Y, or Z. Have you performed a SWOT? Do you understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, the industry that you're in? It could be, and a lot of times I see this with proposals, because when I see proposals, I have, because of who I am and how I am as a person, I don't just think of people as an application. This isn't just application 572 for grant number 375, right?
Right.
This is a person who, whether or not they are eligible, whether or not they're X, Y, or Z, believes, hopefully, in what they're doing, right? And so when I read your application, I'm thinking about you as a person, and I'm thinking about your business as a whole. And a lot of times what I see is some people don't realize they have a great idea, wrong industry. They have a great product, wrong delivery system, right? And they're so married and stuck to the idea of certain things have to be a certain way or look a certain way, and they can't get away from that they're robbing themselves the opportunity to
100%.
succeed.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't call what that is, but yeah, I'm gonna need y'all to shake that today because woof, there is so. And the thing is, like, I'll look at because I deal with a lot. My clients, a lot of my clients are in real estate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And private equity. There's so much money out there, girl.
So much.
Trillions of dollars just floating around, waiting to make some money.
I know people think it's a joke all of the time. There are 3 private foundations. One of them is Bill Gates and his husband and his wife's foundation. They hand out almost $49 million in grant funding annually. And people don't realize the amount of money that's out there is absolutely insane. When you see the number, it's billions and billions and billions of dollars waiting to be claimed. All they're looking for is somebody to tell whoever the grant committee is or the funding committee is who I am, what I'm doing, why it's going to be of service, why it's a great idea, why it deserves this money, and they are there ready to hand it to you.
Yeah, cut the check immediately. No delays. No 69. No net 30s, 90s, 80s,
Nothing.
100s.
No.
Tomorrow.
No payment plans. No nothing. I'm cutting you $30,000 check after I just read 2 pages of information because it was that good.
Yeah. Damn. Yeah, there's so much money out there. And the thing is, what happens, unfortunately, with our community and a lot of the case is, especially like those top down like organizations where the funds come from the government and then they have to just deploy it. Mm-hmm. They're like, okay, well, nobody's using it. So what now?
Yeah, that is definitely something that happens a lot. A lot of times, especially because grants are primarily funded, and again, this is a misconception, they're not coming from Fortune 500 companies, they're coming
Right.
from private foundations. A lot of times, if year after year, let's say I have a foundation that's allocating $5 million to grant funding. If year after year, only 2 million of that is being used, then next year, only $2 million is going to be allocated.
Right.
Now, because of the lack of applications, because of the lack of good applications for
lack of better words,
yeah, for the lack of good applications, for the lack of people understanding how to apply to grants, whether or
right.
not they're eligible, how to communicate, what needs to be communicated in order to receive the funding, you've now taken $3 million out of the pot.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's crazy. And we're already like sitting here fighting for scraps. It's wild. Yeah, we definitely need to talk because I'm sure you have some good ideas about what I'm gonna ask you about. But girl, you know what I realized? Like I've completely conceded to the angry black woman trope. I'm her.
And
Yeah.
that's okay.
Mhm.
Because you know what?
Yeah.
There's someone out there ready to fund the angry black woman trope.
Yeah. I'm ready because it really bothers me. It really, really bothers me. Like I if I think about it too much, I might cry. Like for real because it's just we're already economically at a disadvantage. We're already not positioned. We don't have the education. A lot of this information is democratized. Like just when you look at all the things already working against us and then you just know it's out there. Girl, don't make
I
me mad here. Don't make me mad.
There's a lot of times, I think the times when I get the most upset is when I see black and brown owned businesses apply for grants and they have a great business idea,
Yeah.
wrong industry. And I'm
Right.
thinking to myself, if I were allowed to reach out to this person and say
Mhm.
something X, Y, and Z, this person really could be, propelled into the stratosphere
Different
with what
world.
they have going on. And I get so incredibly upset because, again, we're already at a disadvantage. And a lot of times I don't know necessarily who I'm working for. I get handed, this is the grant that you're processing for. This is what the requirements are. This is what we're looking for. We want you to use your best judgment and discernment in this area, in this area. But by reading what they're handing me on the back end, a lot of times I can kind of suss out not necessarily who I'm working for, but the kind of people that they are. And I'm going to
Mhm.
be honest, a lot of times it is Caucasian people with the Caucasian money looking for other Caucasian businesses. Now, when I do get the people that are asking specific questions like what your ethnicity is, if you're applying for a grant and they're asking what your ethnicity is, I want you to realize 8 out of 10 times it's because they're specifically looking for a person in a specific group. And a
Yeah.
lot of times that has to do with, again, PR, it has to do
Mhm.
with tax write-offs, it has to
Yeah.
do with government funding, it has to do with things like that. And a lot of
Yeah.
people don't realize that because the reality is, what does the color of my skin have to do with my business idea?
Right. Right.
Unless you have a quota to meet, unless you have something specific that you are looking for,
Mhm.
it genuinely has nothing to do with my business,
Right.
right? So when you're looking at grants like the Fearless Fund that are specifically geared to our community, I
Wait,
don't need to ask.
hold on one second. I shit you not. I just wrote down fearless. You can't see it. I just
I
wrote
get
down
their emails
fearless.
all the time. I got 3 of them before we were on this call, right? Because they got the summit going on, they got all sorts of stuff going. I get all of the emails, right? And again, I can't say specifically that I've worked for them, but I have an inkling because of what I see that a
Mhm.
lot of times when stuff get handed to you in the
Yeah.
background, it looks different than how it's presented to the public, right? You have
Yeah.
a ton more information. There's a ton more that needs to be looked at. There are a lot of gray zones. There are hard
Yeah.
stops. There are soft stops, right?
Yeah.
This is an absolute no. This is a maybe, we'll consider it, et cetera, et cetera. And
Mhm.
that isn't something that you see as an individual or as a business when you apply to a grant, but that is something that the committee or the processors see when they're looking at your applications.
Right.
And a lot of times I can tell, again, if I'm reading the information, I'm going through the packet, I'm at the brief, I'm at the meeting, I'm asking questions, et cetera, et cetera. And they want to know what area your business is serving in. I mean, geographically, they
Yeah.
want to know what the color of your skin is. They want to know, your ethnicity. They want to know how much you earn in a specific amount of time serving this community, and et cetera, et cetera. It's because they've already decided they're looking for a specific type of person to fund.
Right. 100%. Damn. Okay. I have one more question before we go into your business because we need to know about you now, Alissa. Forget people, right? We'll figure that out eventually, I guess. But so, how do you feel about what is going on with the Fearless Fund? I don't know if you heard about them being sued essentially for who knows what. What is it really? But yeah, have you heard about them being sued? And what are your thoughts on that? How do you feel about that?
I think there is a lot of nuance, and because there's so much mystery around funding, whether it's VC funding, whether it's grant funding, whether it's government funding, because it's so mystified and misunderstood. Yeah. I think it's very easy a lot of times for people to feel like maybe they aren't being treated fairly, or et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And without knowing the details of who did what, who was responsible for X, Y, Z, it's really hard to say. But it's disappointing to see, especially because they are one of the people, or one of the collectives of businesses and VCs that are funding people that look like us. It was definitely disheartening to see that they were being sued, but we'll have to see how it plays out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fair.
Again, as someone in the background, I know a lot of times, again, if there's a hard stop and a soft stop, and I pass something with a soft stop along, if I'm not, the final person deciding the 10 finalists, if I'm not the person that's doing that, and I pass along a soft stop, that person may have different hard and soft stops than I have. If they get my soft stop and they're like, okay, if they get to this point, but they don't have X, Y, or Z, then unfortunately you gotta push it back down. It's not going to move forward. Then I'm not able to see that, right? Unless I am that person. I'm getting a different brief from the person next to me. The person above me is getting a different brief from everybody else underneath. And unless I'm able to see or say who's doing what and what the requirements are, and I'm gonna be honest, sometimes some of these grants and the requirements and stuff that they do behind the scenes are a little bit shady.
Crazy.
And sometimes they're not always, again, they're not all altruistic. They're not about giving people money because we want everyone to succeed. And it's not about that, right? It is self-serving. And essentially, once you understand that, it's easier to see how something or a collective like that can get caught up in some messy stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm really hoping that that's not the case
with them. Yeah. Man. Okay. Maybe I have so many questions for you outside of this conversation. Okay, we'll talk. But listen, okay, so tell us about your business, please. You said there was a for-profit and the nonprofit element. Could you tell us about both?
Yes. So I actually grew up in the Caribbean. I grew up on a small island called Trinidad, which is in the Lesser Antilles, right off the coast of Venezuela. Mm-hmm. And the ocean has always been my first love. Whenever I was sad, whenever I was stressed out, whenever I was going through it, my mom would take us to the beach, and literally all of those things would just melt away. My insecurities, my body dysmorphia, etc., stress about school life, just living in the culture that I was living in. My relief has always been the ocean. So when I enlisted in the Navy and I started traveling, and what my job assignment was in the Navy was to be a program manager for the religious ministries program. And a lot of what we do has to do with counseling, community service, getting people connected in the community so that they can be of service and, propel that sort of communicative mission that the Navy has wherever they are in the world. And I was primarily overseas. I saw a lot of things that I was disappointed in terms of not specific. I can't specifically say the Navy, but People were dumping things in places they weren't supposed to be dumping them,
Mm.
or I would do, let's say I organize a beach cleanup, and I would think to myself, I'm organizing a beach cleanup today, and I understand that helps the locals enjoy this beach for the next 2 weeks. But the reality is, because of the systems in place, 2 weeks from now, it's going to be dirty again. Because
Yeah.
of consumption and X, Y, or Z, a month from now, it's going to be a place that the locals
In the
can't.
walk. Yeah.
And
Right.
being from a small island, I understand, I think, better than a lot of people that I've come in contact with living here in
Mm.
the US, just how much what you do on a regular basis impacts people living in
Yeah.
smaller communities.
Yeah.
When our ecosystem in places like the Caribbean is disrupted, you are messing with people's lives. You're
Mhm.
messing with their food supply. You're messing with the biodiversity that helps support life on that island.
Yeah.
Look at Hawaii and what they're going through right now.
Mhm.
And when I started my business, which is a swimwear business, back in 2017, it had a lot to do with feeling like I wasn't being of service to my community. And I'm
Mm.
talking about my community back home. I'm talking about my community of people that live on small islands, my community of people that are trying to do something about the economic and environmental impacts of how we consume as much as we consume. And
Right.
I felt like there had to be a solution. And
Yeah.
I wanted to take on the world, right? That mentality that I have to fix it, I have to do something about it. And again, I had to do my SWOT, and I had to realize I've got to take a corner.
Yeah.
I've got to pick a corner and figure out how I can do the work in my corner. And for me, that turned out to be swimwear. One, because I was really passionate about helping people that were having insecurities surrounding their body. I have
Mm.
body dysmorphia, and I know for a very long time that was very difficult to deal with. So even feeling confident enough to wear a swimsuit in public was a big deal, right? And then I had to look at the industry as a whole. Again, you understand what industry you're in. How is what I'm looking to do typically done, and how can I do it differently? How
Yeah.
can I solve not necessarily the entire problem, but how can I be part of the solution
Yeah.
so that if others are just to follow suit, that we make a bigger impact. And then beyond that, how do I make this something that isn't self-serving? It isn't
Mm.
just about me and my body dysmorphia. It isn't just about me and my little country in this corner of the world. How do I make an impact so much so that other people want to be a part of that, right? I always tell people, and people think it's strange when I say this, my business is not about selling somewhere. My
Yeah.
business is about people understanding how what you're consuming impacts all of us, and that when you make the choice to buy the swimmer, that you're buying swimmer that in its in its sense is made with those things in mind, and as well is going to serve the purpose, the mission, right? So when
Yeah.
we're making the swimwear, I use Econail and I use Reprieve. I use one company out of Indonesia. I actually met a group of ladies while I was traveling in Indonesia. And so what happens is that plastic waste and plastic bottles, nylon, fishing nets, etc.,
Mm.
are rescued from the ocean by volunteer divers. That is then taken to a processing facility where it's regenerated and turned into textile. Then we take that and we turn that into the fabric. Then that goes from there to the collective that I'm working with in Indonesia. And again, it was just cosmic, right? Like I met these people on accident on a
Yeah.
family vacation in Indonesia, and it's a group of 10 women who sew the swimwear by hand in Indonesia. I work with them on designs, grading, things like that. And then once it gets to me and we do all the final stages things, when someone purchases the swimwear, 1% goes to 1% for the planet, And then the other 4%, it goes to a charity of our choosing or the company's choosing. A lot of them are listed on our website, and we kind of rotate through them based on what's happening. There's a lot of things happening in Hawaii right now. So I think, for example, if you were to purchase something right now, we would want to look for a charity that is on the grounds over there doing something to help the locals. While
Right.
COVID was happening, a lot of the charitable donations were being sent to hospitals or organizations that were working to get hospitals the supplies that they needed. During Plastic Free July, the donations are sometimes sent to that organization. It really just changes, and it depends on what's going on. But I always wanted to be about how we can be of service right now with where we are. I understand that I don't have the capacity to just go out and clean up all the ocean waste.
Right.
However, if I'm going to do something, if I'm going to sell swimwear, if I'm going to make shoes, if I'm going to make handbags, whatever it is you're doing, think about how can I do what I want to do, but also be of some sort of service.
I want to hug you. I just feel compelled to hug you. And if you didn't want to hug, I wouldn't do it because,
I will gladly accept. I'm a hug,
consent.
so
Okay,
it's okay.
good. Oh my gosh, because the way you even articulated your brand story is just so perfect, and the tie-in and, like, it's so good. Like, you get
And
it, and I just wanna hug you because you get it.
exactly. I tell people, even when I'm speaking, I understand that everybody is not always as passionate about their
Yeah,
business as
yeah,
I am about mine. However, you look at how I said what I said and the way that you responded. I understand what industry I'm in. I understand that it's in an industry where typically there's a lot of waste, there's a lot of
mhm,
overconsumption, et cetera, et cetera. I explained my why. Okay,
yeah,
it personally ties back to me, but I'm telling you how it's of service to other people. When
yeah,
you understand those things, whether it's speaking to someone about your business, whether it's a pitch competition,
yeah,
whether it's, a slide deck that you have to submit, whether it's a grant form that you're filling out on SurveyMonkey, whatever it is,
right,
when you understand those core things,
yeah,
it's easy to articulate who you are, what you're doing, why. When you've done your SWOT, you can say, I understand that it's a highly competitive business. I understand how I'm different. I understand how to market how I'm different. I understand what are the threats, and I can tell you what I'm doing about it, right? Those are the things that set you up for success.
mm. Yeah, that's amazing. My heart is so full. Between yesterday and today, I am full. I could, like, take a nap, and I don't even nap, so I really could. Like, yeah, that's amazing. See, I want more Alissas in the world. Like, I just want so many more lists. I just wanna take you, just, like, copy and paste and just, like, "Here, fill out this application."
It's
You do.
all
Yeah.
about information.
Yeah.
When I first started, even just in my business, I knew my why. I didn't
Mhm.
know anything else.
Right.
Didn't completely understand my market the first year that I was trying to launch. It
Mm.
took me 3 years to launch because I had to step back and be like,
Mm.
I may not know, I don't have to know everything to launch. And a lot of people
Right.
feel like they need to. You
Mhm.
don't, but you do have to understand some very core things,
Yeah.
right? If you're not doing something with purpose, it's easy to get lost.
Yeah.
If you don't understand the industry that you're working with, it's easy to get lost.
Yeah.
If you don't understand how to do very core things that you need in order to operate a business, it will feel easy to get lost. And a
Yeah.
lot of times when I see people that look like me want to be in the position where they're receiving these grant funds, a lot of times what it is that they simply don't have that education. They don't
Yeah.
have more understanding. And I think it's so unfortunate because all of the information is out there.
Yeah. It's all there. Yeah. How much have you been awarded to date?
Ah, a lot.
Okay. Okay. You don't have to
A
say, that's
lot.
fine. Okay. I believe you. Yeah.
High 5 figures. We're not at 6 figures yet, but it's
Mhm. Okay. I mean, I'm sure you're gonna do it, and I'm sure 7 figures is in your future too, so I'm sure. Dang, that's great. I kind of want to end it on this note because
Mhm.
this is such a high point, and I'm like, I really feel like energetically like full. So, Alissa, please, first of all, tell us where to shop your swimwear line, please.
Yeah, you can shop Soulteria.com. That's Soultria. We're on Instagram, we're on TikTok. We're really working right now with the last bit of funding that we got to really ramp up marketing.
Okay.
A lot of times you can have a good product and not understand. I don't have a marketing background. That's not my
Mhm.
wheelhouse. And I think what I had to realize while I was, doing my SWOT, while I was continuously assessing where I was, is that one of the areas where I wasn't necessarily failing, but not doing as well as I could was marketing.
Mm,
Because once people knew who I was, what I was doing, why I was doing it, we were in front of the public and we were seeing the numbers, right? We were seeing the sales come in, we were seeing um, the site visits and things like that.
right.
But if you have a great product, but no one knows who you are, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Yeah,
It
100%.
doesn't matter. And it's the same when I'm reading these grant proposals. If you have a great service, but you can't tell me how you're going to get it in front of the people that are already willing to pay for it,
Yeah.
it's going to be hard for me to hand you money.
Yeah, and that's all a function of, like, targeting and understanding what
Understand
standard
your
practice are.
industry. Yeah,
Right.
it all ties back to those core things. And I think once we start educating ourselves about that and demystifying it, because a lot of times I will see someone or a business and I will think, I get grants for this all of the time. And I say, hey, have you considered applying for a grant? And they're like, no, it's too
Yeah.
hard. People like me don't ever get money, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, that's not at all true.
Yeah.
I think that fear of being told no or failing stops us a lot of times from doing things. And one thing that I always credit to my mother is that I am not afraid to fail.
No.
I am not afraid to fall flat on my face.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, the more that I do that, the more likely as I move forward,
You're
it's
gonna
not
learn. Yeah,
right.
you're gonna learn.
It's like when you're a kid, your mom tells you not to do something and you do it anyway, you get hurt. And you're like, okay, I understand when I'm told X, Y, or Z that it's for
Mhm.
a reason. And you move forward in life, you learn things and you constantly learn and you adapt, you change. Same as in your business. If something is not working, pivot. If you have a great idea, but it's not reaching the people that it needs to reach, it may just be your marketing. It
Yeah.
may just be your SEO. It could be a multitude of things. But if you're so married to the idea of what you're already doing and it has to work the way that you're doing it, you're not
Right.
going to get anywhere.
Right. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and declare it. Anybody who came before this episode, y'all just gonna have to be mad because this is my favorite episode. I said it. This is my favorite mental money podcast episode. This is number one. Number one. Yeah.
I
Okay.
appreciate that. As
Yeah.
a first part-time podcast interview,
Yeah.
that means a lot.
Yeah. No, that's number one, hands down. And I've had like a lot of faves, but no, this one takes the cake. Okay, we're good. We're good. All right, you guys. I'm gonna leave all of the links for you guys to shop her store. Make sure you do that because she gave you everything. Like there may be one thing I'm gonna ask her to do for us off
Mhm.
air, but she gave you everything. She gave you 99. All right. There's 1% left, which is the SWOT analysis, which we'll talk about. But yeah, one she gave you 99. So go ahead and pull up on her and give her 99 too. Okay. I appreciate you so much. I can't even really put into words how much I do. Like this has been the one. Yeah. So yeah, y'all. Thank you, Alyssa. Listen to whatever's coming up next week. Follow on TikTok, all the things. All right, I'm not even gonna